Hey hoopballers, are you into sports betting? Do you want to know why a certain game has a funky line? Well, Hoopball has you covered. Today in Sports Betting is a great addition to all your handicapping questions with hosts Ira Silver and Devin Ellington. We break down game lines and future bets on all sports and try to make some money along the way. Follow us on Twitter at Hoopball Gaming, at Ira Silver Magic, and at DALE007. And download Today in Sports Betting in the App Store, Google Play, and available on Spotify.
The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Hello, and welcome to the Hoop Ball DFS Today podcast. I am your host, Mike Patra, joined by my good buddy Aaron Asmus to break down this wonderful Thursday, September 10th card for you. And I say card, but we are here to talk one basketball game. It is the showdown slate. We'll primarily be using this DFS pricing, or this, DraftKings pricing. But before we jump into anything, let me check in on my good buddy Aaron. How was your week so far? We're halfway through right now, recording this Wednesday night. So what's going on, brother?
I mean, this is probably the best time to be a sports fan right now. I'm preparing for NFL DFS tomorrow. I'm doing main slate DFS for Sunday, working on MLB and still grinding playoffs and NBA. It's so much to do, so little time, you know?
Yeah, how much Will Fuller is too much Will Fuller tomorrow?
Never enough.
That's
Always
the question.
Will Fuller.
Yeah. But nonetheless, I mean, you hit it on the head, man. We got some good sports. We got football starting up today or tomorrow, depending on when you're listening to this. So it'll probably be out prior to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or a.m. But we had that great game. That Toronto-Boston game was absolutely phenomenal. That thing was off the chain. It was exactly what everybody's hoping to see when you watch a playoff game. So, we get a game 7 now. One to be excited about. But we got some good action to break down right here, man. We got a nice little tight series between LA and Houston. It's pretty fresh off the rips. We got guys coming out of the woodworks. You ready to jump into this?
Let's do it.
All right, brother. Quick, just as I build up the suspense as we're going to jump into it. Quick shout out to our presenting sponsor. If you guys haven't already checked out Manscaped, head over there. Use the promo code HoopBall20, HOOPBALL20. Get 20% off plus free shipping on your entire purchase. Check out that Lawnmower 3.0. Or maybe it's the perfect package kit. Whatever it may be, if it's for yourself or for a significant other or just a friend, they will be very much appreciative of it, and they will be living in luxury with the best male grooming products out there on the market. But let's jump right into this, man. We have the LA Lakers going against the Houston Rockets. Showdown slate on DraftKings. This game is expected to start about 7 p.m. 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Excuse me right there. It's going to have a 220.5 game total, with the Lakers being favored by 5 points. And as far as an injury report goes, Robert Covington being considered questionable, and Daniel House has been ruled out due to personal reasons. Covington had that mean collision in that last game. Looked like he possibly could have broke his nose. He was evaluated for concussion. They said that he does not have concussion-like symptoms, all this, and that. Nonetheless, that looked like a hard hit, and I would expect some repercussions on his physical front for that. But let's start off right away, I guess, before we jump into anything. I know you wanted to touch on some showdown strategy, so I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Aaron. Let the good people know exactly, how you look at these slates, I guess, differently from just a regular old main slate.
Yeah, so in general, just showdown as a game on DraftKings in particular just hasn't been solved yet. Kind of like cash games on regular slate and even tournaments. Just people just don't really understand how to use the 1.5x captain spot, or are a little more afraid to be unique in the captain spot. So on a slate like today, where the things are so top heavy and star heavy, there are a couple really good ways we can differentiate ourselves from the field and try some things in tournaments. that give us a chance to actually win a tournament. And generally, these showdown slate tournaments are smaller than the main slate tournaments, which kind of actually gives you a chance to win. And even though there's a decent chance you'll end up splitting with somebody because there's just only so many possible winning combinations. But still, showdown is definitely, especially during this playoffs, is something I've been diving into quite a bit more and finding just a bigger edge overall in my return on investment.
Awesome. I mean, that's a great way to put it. And that's why we brought you on, man. Just these show. No, I'm just joking. It's good. I'm glad to do this show with you because I tell a lot of people, I don't play a ton of showdowns. I'll play it tomorrow because I'm a degenerate. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to take it off just because I'm going to get action. And I'm not saying I don't do well in showdowns. I just, for some reason, I just always temper expectations. I usually lower my volume by, a vast majority. Like, if I'm normally playing, 15% of my bankroll, I might play 5 or 7 on a showdown slate. Well, it's definitely going to be much lower. And mostly because of like what you said. I play tournaments, 80% of the time you're splitting this with 4 or 5 people, but that doesn't mean you can't profit and win a good amount of money. Especially knowing that it's going to be opening day football tomorrow. You have to imagine that a large, if not vast majority of the DFS community is not going to have their eye on basketball. They will be watching football, and they are going to be playing majority of football. They've been researching football. So you're going to have an edge if you're one of those basketball heads like me. I do play football, but I am a basketball head, and this is where my head is 95% of the time. So let's start talking about this Laker team. We'll start off with the Lakers, just because we've been seeing some good play from Rondo since he returned. Playoff Rondo has arrived. He's been looking excellent. You have LeBron. You have Davis playing a little bit more of the center, which opens up some Kuzma minutes. So we have some options now, whereas opposed to it just used to be LeBron and Davis. That's it. Pack it in. Call it a day. So I'll pass it over to you. Why don't you touch on a few of these Laker options that you think are a top priority for you?
So, this kind of goes back to this showdown strategy. A lot of the time, people just feel like they have to jam in the best player into the 1.5x just because, if you think about it intuitively, if I think LeBron James is going to score the most points, why would I not want him to get 1.5 times those amount of points? But especially on these types of slates where everything is so top heavy, most of the usage, most of the production is going to come from, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, not Dwight Howard, maybe 10 years ago, but Russell Westbrook and James Harden. Those 4 guys is where most of the usage, most of the playmaking is going to come from. But I mean, when you have a guy like Rondo, from what he's shown in this series so far, he's been amazing. I mean, just to put it lightly, which is very weird to say, where Rondo hasn't been good for probably 5 or 6 years, but he's easily been their 3rd best player. I don't expect the shooting to stay nearly as good as it's been, but we know Rondo's been a guy throughout his whole career. He's gonna get involved in the glass. He's gonna get assists. He's gonna walk into some steals. And when you look at his price tag of 5,200 or 7,800 as the captain spot, I think makes by far the most sense on this slate to be your captain, and then that lets you get really creative with the rest of your lineup, rather than forcing in one of the expensive guys and then essentially having to dumpster dive down the rest on the rest of your team, or like 3 or 4 of the spots on the rest of your team.
No, I'm with you, and that's generally if I'm building. It really depends on the exact game that you're talking about. So this is a kind of scenario where we have plenty of studs we want to pay for. So yes, you can go and play a Harden, a LeBron, or one of these guys in your captain spot, but then you're really limiting yourself to your other options and who you're going to be going to. So, the way I look at this slate is I think you want to do your best to get 3 of these studs in there if you could. They don't need to be in your captain. You're not going to be able to get 3 of them in there if one of them is in your captain. So how could you get 3 and still feel confident about your lineup? Now, I've been messing around with a few builds, and I don't want to just go off the rails and start talking about it. But I'm with you. I do want some Rondo. Whether he's in my captain, whether he's in my utility, he's a guy that I think that we pretty much have to play at this point, especially when you're just talking about a showdown slate. The minutes are there for him. Back-to-back games, we're at pretty much 30 minutes. He's playing he's letting LeBron play off ball more. We're not going to get necessarily the 5 steals that we saw in his second game back, but he's going to have a decent amount of usage, and he's going to find himself on the court. He's going to have to play playoff Rondo. And when you just talk about pure upside for a guy that is that salary on the slate, there's basically him, and then there's Kuzma. And right now, I just feel a little bit more confident when I'm looking at a guy like Rondo as opposed to Kuzma.
Well, and you got to think about a guy like Rondo. When LeBron was essentially building this team, these are the kind of games that he recruited Rondo for, right? And I think there's probably a pretty big level of trust there, and especially with the way he's played in the last couple games, it'd be hard to see Rondo going back down to like 20 minutes or something like that. Because I think LeBron wants him on the floor. I think Anthony Davis probably wants him on the floor. And he's played really well. He's been, like I said, I think he's been the Lakers' third best player pretty easily in this series. And kind of just to touch on a point that when we talked about in the context of this slate, I think that's kind of what's made Showdown tough for people to really figure it out. Is everything is so, we always talk about it even on main slates, but there's kind of always a generic cash game build. There's ways you can be different in tournaments. On Showdown, there's not really you have. It's even more pronounced the amount you have to be just slate context specific. Like you have to build your teams around the talent and how many stars are there, how many viable role players are there, and then that determines your lineup. And I think that's been a really big issue for why people haven't been able to figure out this game format yet.
Absolutely. And it's sometimes people try to walk into different slates, different nights, different games, and try to take the same approach. And it might work for you a couple days in a row just by sheer luck, or maybe the slates are similar, whatever it may be. But you really need to view, especially in playoffs, every slate as its own entity. Pricing doesn't matter the night before. You're looking at price relative to what the slate is and what's available to you, and that's kind of where I come down to my build. So, the last question I guess I really have for you, we touched on just about everybody that matters, I guess, on this. There's your Danny Greens, or obviously he's in play, but only 400 less than Rondo at the utility spot. I think most people probably just go Rondo, and I'm right there with them.
Right.
If you had to pick LeBron or Davis, I'll ask you that. Which guy do you prefer? And then the other guy I wanted to touch on is a guy like Markieff Morris, who's found his way back into this rotation over the past few games.
Yeah, I think the way I'm leaning right now is playing both LeBron and Davis. If I had to choose, I'm going to go LeBron. It's just in close games when it's when we know LeBron's going to be on the floor for 38 plus minutes, like he just has so much of the offense run through him. Like there just really isn't, even with Rondo on the floor, there's just not a possession where LeBron's not involved in some way. He is more expensive, and I think that's a good way to be unique, is just leave LeBron out. And, there's plenty of ways to capture his upside, with James Harden, with Russ. Even if you went a more balanced build with Robert Covington or Eric Gordon, that could work out over, LeBron and a super punt like a Markieff Morris, who's incredibly volatile. But going to Markieff, I think his role is secure. JaVale McGee, he only played 6 minutes in the last game. Dwight Howard didn't get off the bench. I think the Lakers have kind of realized they can't play a real center in this series. They'll just get run off the floor. So yeah, I think you have probably 18 to 20 guaranteed minutes out of Markieff. If he's playing well, he'll probably he'll get a little bit more run. But he kind of fits perfectly in these, 3 Rajon Rondo at captain, 3 studs. And then, kind of in this low 4K tier, I think he's probably the cheapest play that I like on this slate.
Yep, that's exactly why I wanted to. I'm kind of in the same boat. That's why I wanted to bring him up, because He rounds things out nicely for my initial build. And yeah, I think if he's playing 20 minutes at least, he played 23 over the past two. If he's playing at least 20 at that price tag on a showdown slate, I have a ton of interest in him. So I really like him on this slate. I will probably have a vast majority of him, and I'm with you. I like both having Davis and LeBron. I will mix and match between all these studs though, and
Yep.
probably keep my captain spot between the same two people. And you mentioned one of them, Rondo, and the next guy is on the other team. So we'll hop over to Houston now. Two top guys, Harden and Westbrook. Do you prefer one over the other? And if so, who?
For cash game, I mean, I want to play Harden, obviously. I'm just finding it tough to get LeBron, Davis, and Harden all into the team and liking my other two spots. I mean, Russ, he hasn't been good, but he did have a fairly decent bounce back game in this last one. Got up to 36 minutes. And you're getting a severe discount on him. He's $1,600 cheaper than Davis, $2,400 cheaper than Harden, $2,800 cheaper than LeBron. I think Russ is probably my favorite contrarian play at captain because you can still get pretty creative and build some really good teams, and you're still accessing some pretty tremendous upside. So I want to play Harden, but I think the correct play in cash games at least is Russ.
Yeah, I've been pounding the Russell Westbrook drum since he came back, and it really paid off for me in that last one. I'm going to continue to do it. Even if these guys were close in price tags, I just want to continue to play Russ. It's just point guards against LA has been a thing all season long. They've just been dominating. He's finally getting his minutes back up. He's looking good. He's looking aggressive. And let's be real. When he's actually hitting his shot, the peripheral stats are going to be there. When he's actually hitting his shot, he's got tremendous upside, and I can't ignore him. And like you said, he makes perfect sense for those three stud builds, and that's kind of where I'm running into him. I messed around with him in the captain spot a little bit, and I didn't mind it. And like you said, it might be a little contrarian. I'm kind of in the camp of what we were talking about earlier, though. I think that's where most people might go right off the rip is a guy like Westbrook, because he is the cheapest out of the studs, has the same upside. And they'll be like, I'll make it work. So I'm with you. I prefer Westbrook over Harden. I don't think I'll even have too much Harden on this slate in general. I don't think it's a bad thing to do. I mean, if you wanted to pivot, like my first initial build has Davis, LeBron, and Westbrook. If I wanted to go, Harden, Westbrook, and Davis, I don't see anything wrong with that. And I'll probably mix and match that as well.
Yeah.
But I just prefer those, I prefer, LeBron over him, and I prefer Westbrook over Harden as well for the price discrepancy. And then, I touched on Covington a little bit right off the rip. Dealing with what could be the after effects of getting popped pretty good in that collision where, they questioned if he had a broken nose. They said no concussion. One would think, it's playoffs. If he had a concussion, would he even admit it? So at 7,400, is he a guy that's on your radar, or is he kind of just not making that build?
No, probably not for cash games because I think the three stud build is more than likely the correct way to go. But I'm diving into the tournament streets for these showdown slates for sure, and I think if you go a little more balanced with like Covington and Eric Gordon, guys we know are going to be on the floor. They have a scary low floor, as kind of Eric Gordon showed the last game. But if these guys get hot with their shot, or Covington gets going with the blocks and steals to access his upside. These guys could easily be, on the winning team for this slate. I think another guy I'm really looking at, especially with Daniel House being inactive. I think Jeff Green makes a ton of sense.
Yes.
At 4,600. And it's never fun. No one likes rostering Jeff Green. I lost a ton of money on him in that OKC series because I basically got him wrong every single game. He'd go off, I'd get on him the next game, he'd suck, and kind of did that dance for the entire series. But I mean, he's just too cheap. He's just he's all but guaranteed. Probably low 30s in the low 30s minutes. He's kind of, they might even play quote unquote big with him and PJ Tucker and Robert Covington on the floor all at the same time. Yeah, I mean, he just has to play, right? Because I mean,
I'm with you.
I think he's going to be popular, but I think he's probably my favorite value play on the slate outside of Rondo.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'll eat it. I don't care if it's chalk. I'll eat it. 4,600. It rounds out those builds nicely. And where I was kind of taking my contrarian approach was actually throwing him at my captain spot here and there.
Yeah.
It's you can either put him or Rondo and still make a 3-stud build work easily. With the same exact salary, not really having to switch much else, but being contrarian is something that you're going to want to do to separate yourself. So maybe mix and match. I prefer Rondo as far as cash, but as a tournament, I don't mind looking at Jeff Green in that cap, allowing me to get 3 of these studs, rounding it off with a little bit of Markieff Morris. So there you go. Just pretty much gave out an entire lineup. Do with it what you may. I don't think it's going to be necessarily like a secretive lineup. I think it's going to be a highly owned one, but nonetheless, in cash, that's okay. We don't mind. Whether we finish in the top half or top 3/4, still win the same amount. And then we'll touch on, I guess, Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker. They're guys that I don't necessarily mind. They're just not making my initial builds. I prefer Covington over both these guys. If I had to pick one, it would probably just, Gordon, safe, secure floor. I'd probably prefer him for still $1,000 more than Tucker. But, struggling to get these guys in my lineup, and that's simply from a construction-wise, I think.
Yeah, and I think one point that you hit on that I really want to hammer home is to be contrarian, that doesn't mean, going down and playing like KCP in the captain spot or, putting J.R. Smith on your team or something like that. It can easily, like you said, you can have the same exact team as you had before, but put Jeff Green in the captain spot instead of Rondo. That's going to make you contrarian. And then if Jeff Green beats Rondo, all of a sudden you're way ahead of all those Rondo captain teams, which gives you a pretty significant edge on a showdown slate. So when you're being contrarian, really focus on a small core of plays, but don't feel like you have to get super crazy. It could be even as simple as I'm playing James. I think James Harden is going to be lower owned than LeBron James. So I'm going to put James Harden on the same exact team that I would have LeBron on, that sort of thing. And you get maybe you get like a 15 to 20% ownership edge there if Harden wins over LeBron. Just things like that, that can really give you a shot to actually win a tournament.
Well said, my good friend. All right, brother. Well, I think that pretty much rounds everything out as far as guys worth talking about, I guess. I don't really think there's anybody else. Like I said, I don't want to start mentioning guys out of nowhere. It is worth noting that Tyson Chandler has still not sniffed the court, really. So I thought that was going to happen, and I was wrong on that. But here we are. Now we get to see Markieff Morris because he hasn't. So. All right. Well, before we take off, guys, if I can ask you two more quick favors. Go check out my bookie if you haven't already with that first kickoff tomorrow with the Texans versus the Chiefs. Get your bets in at my bookie. Use that promo code HoopBall. Let them know that we sent you, and they'll give you a nice little deposit match. Some little goodies over there. Awesome customer service. The #1 bookie site out there that I will ever recommend. And then, give us a nice little rate review, 5 stars, if you could, on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, wherever you're listening to this. It's available all over the place. It means a lot to us, guys. It allows us to keep the lights on over here, let our sponsors know that we're providing you guys good content and we're worth listening to. And, also that constructive criticism approach, we get to get a little bit better for you. And then give us a follow-up. You can find me at Mike Patra, MikeApotria. And let me see if I can do this. You can find Aaron at Asmus Sports, ASMUSSPORTS.
That's
it. Right?
Yep.
All right. I'm getting it. I may not know the schedule just yet, but I'm getting the Twitters down. And then as always, we'll be back tomorrow. I'll be on with Breton. We'll be breaking down the wonderful Friday card for you guys. So As always, from everybody over here at Hoopball, thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you guys tomorrow. Let's go out there and crush one of these showdown tournaments.
This has been a Hoopball presentation.